You should never cross paths with a member of the Hells Angels. But in David Glass's case, he was randomly targeted by Adam Lee Hall. Not just once, but multiple times. Adam Lee Hall was the one who committed these acts. Regardless of whether this is horrific or not, the district attorney went further, describing the murder and dismemberment as vicious and cruel, and stating that all evidence pointed exclusively to Hall. These were not merely killings, Your Honor. They were depraved, hate-driven acts that served not only to prevent 3 men from testifying in court but also fulfilled some twisted desire, an intent to tear apart their community. In his closing remarks, Superior Court Judge Jeffrey Kinder declared that Adam Lee Hall's case represented the worst depravity he had witnessed in his decades-long judicial career. Hall had been a high-ranking member of the Hells Angels Springfield chapter in Massachusetts. He had previously been arrested for assault before joining the Outlaw motorcycle gang and had remained on law enforcement's radar ever since for coercing and intimidating witnesses involved in cases against the Hells Angels' criminal activities. In essence, Hall was the group's enforcer. Higher-ups routinely dispatched him to threaten or intimidate individuals throughout the greater Springfield area, but Hall seemed to harbor a particular vendetta against one man, David Glasser. Glasser was an intellectually disabled man living in an independent living facility alongside his friends Edward Frampton and Robert Chadwell. After agreeing to serve as a witness in one of several cases against Hall, Glasser became a target of the Hells Angels. In Glasser's case, however, Hall took it upon himself to harass him relentlessly. Beyond assaulting and robbing him on multiple occasions, Hall openly threatened Glasser's life more than once. In the days leading up to Hall's trial on charges of weapons possession and witness intimidation, Glasser was offered police protection. Yet before he could testify, Hall and several associates stormed Glasser's residence, abducted him, Frampton, and Chadwell, and took them to a remote location where they murdered them. According to reports, Glasser had been the primary target all along. Frampton and Chadwell were simply unfortunate enough to have witnessed the kidnapping. Hall ordered that they be taken and eliminated as well. This occurred in 2011, after a community member reported the 3 men missing. Their bodies were discovered in Berkshire County nearly 2 weeks later, and Hall immediately became a person of interest. Nevertheless, it took law enforcement another 2 years to formally charge him in connection with the crime. Glasser's murder served 2 purposes. First, to silence a key witness, and second, to send a chilling message to anyone else who might consider testifying against Hall. The investigation relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and the testimony of David Casey, an accomplice to the crimes. Casey recounted how Hall described the gruesome details of the murders, including shooting the victims. Although no direct forensic evidence, such as DNA or murder weapons, was ever found linking Hall to the killings, prosecutors built a compelling case based on a sequence of events and witness accounts. The trial began on January 13, 2014, in Hampton Superior Court in Springfield. After 16 hours of deliberation over 4 days, the jury found Hall guilty on 15 of 19 charges, including 3 counts each of first-degree murder, kidnapping, and witness intimidation. On February 10, 2014, Judge Kinder sentenced Hall to 3 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. In his sentencing remarks, the judge emphasized the depravity of the crimes, noting that Hall had preyed upon vulnerable individuals. Additional sentences were imposed for related charges, guaranteeing Hall would serve an extra 25 to 42 years on top of his life terms, effectively ensuring he would die in prison. And last, but not least, we have Richard Deere, president of the Las Vegas chapter of the Hells Angels. He epitomizes the challenges authorities face when trying to dismantle these deeply entrenched organizations. His case, along with those that preceded it, stands as a testament to the resilience of the club and the ongoing battle between law enforcement and the outlaw motorcycle world. The story of the Hells Angels is not merely about individual crimes. It is a complex narrative interwoven with threads of brotherhood, rebellion, and, undeniably, criminal enterprise. The willingness to protect one another, to stand defiantly against societal norms, and the powerful sense of belonging all serve as potent forces binding these men together. This loyalty makes it extraordinarily difficult to penetrate the organization and secure convictions, as members are typically unwilling to testify against their own. In many ways, it is as much a cultural phenomenon as it is a criminal one. Consider, for example, Anthony Tate. His decision to break the code of silence and testify against Barger, though undoubtedly shaped by his personal circumstances, reveals the underlying tensions within the club. It demonstrates that even the most unwavering loyalty can fracture under pressure, whether driven by self-interest or a desire to escape a life of crime. Tate's story also illustrates the tactics law enforcement must employ, relying on informants and turning members against each other, to even begin dismantling the web of illicit activity. The RICO Act, referenced in Deer's case and earlier efforts against Barger, represents a critical legal tool in the fight against organized crime. It enables prosecutors to target the entire criminal enterprise rather than focusing solely on isolated offenses. However, as the experiences with Barger and Deer show, successfully prosecuting an organization under RICO remains immensely challenging. It requires proving not only that members engaged in criminal activity, but also that those activities were part of a larger, ongoing scheme designed to generate profit or maintain power. The evidentiary burden is high, and defense attorneys are often skilled at exploiting any weakness in the prosecution's case. The dismissal of the racketeering charges against Deer, though a setback for authorities, is not unexpected. It's a recurring theme throughout the history of the Hells Angels. Efforts to bring down the organization often falter due to lack of concrete evidence, legal technicalities, or the relentless defense mounted by the club's attorneys. However, the Nevada Supreme Court's subsequent ruling officially recognizing the Hells Angels as a criminal gang under state law represents a subtle but significant victory. It provides a legal framework for future investigations and prosecutions, potentially making it easier to target the organization's activities. The case of Richard Deer also underscores the complexities of defining a criminal organization. While the Hells Angels engage in a variety of illegal activities, from drug trafficking and weapons smuggling to extortion and violence, it can be difficult to demonstrate that these activities are part of a coordinated effort to maintain power and generate profit. Defense attorneys often argue that members are independent actors who happen to share a common interest in motorcycles and a sense of brotherhood. The legal battle is therefore not just about individual crimes. It's about the very nature of the organization itself. The violence that erupted on Interstate 11 in May 2022, a tragic culmination of the long-standing rivalry between the Hells Angels and the Vagos, exemplifies the volatile nature of the outlaw motorcycle world. The shooting, which left 7 individuals injured, was not an isolated incident but rather a manifestation of the deep-seated animosity that has plagued these organizations for decades. The retaliatory nature of the attack suggests a deliberate attempt to assert dominance and maintain control over territory and resources. The charges against Deer and his co-defendants, including attempted murder and discharging a firearm into an occupied vehicle, are serious and carry significant penalties. The ongoing legal battles and investigations involving the Hells Angels are not just about individual prosecutions. They're part of a broader effort to disrupt the organization's activities and dismantle its infrastructure. Authorities are employing a multi-pronged approach, targeting not only the leadership but also the foot soldiers and the support networks that enable the club's operations. This includes seizing assets, disrupting supply chains, and infiltrating the organization with informants. It's a long and arduous process, and there are no guarantees of success. The image of the Hells Angels, carefully cultivated over decades, remains a potent symbol of rebellion and defiance. The leather jackets, the tattoos, the motorcycles, all contribute to an aura of toughness and independence that appeals to those who feel alienated from mainstream society. The club has successfully positioned itself as an anti-establishment force, a group of outsiders who reject the rules and regulations of the conventional world. This carefully constructed image helps attract new recruits and maintain the club's mystique. However, beneath this carefully crafted image lies a darker reality, a world of violence, crime, and exploitation. The stories of those harmed by the Hells Angels, the victims of their crimes, are often overlooked in the romanticized portrayals that dominate popular culture. It's important to remember that the club's legacy is not just about brotherhood and rebellion. It's also about the pain and suffering inflicted on those who have crossed its path.
The future of the Hells Angels remains uncertain.
Law enforcement continues to target its activities, while the club works to maintain its image and recruit new members. The ongoing legal battles and investigations will likely continue for years to come, as authorities attempt to dismantle the organization's infrastructure and bring its leaders to justice. Whether they will ultimately succeed remains to be seen, but one thing is clear: the story of the Hells Angels is far from over. The enduring appeal of the Outlaw Motorcycle Club, despite constant scrutiny and legal challenges, suggests that it will continue to exist, in some form or another, for the foreseeable future. The struggle between the club and society will persist, a constant reminder of the enduring allure of rebellion and the persistent challenges of enforcing the law in a world of outlaws. His departure wasn't a clean break, however. The relationships he'd cultivated, the power he'd wielded, didn't simply vanish with a conversion. While he outwardly embraced a new path, his past continued to cast a long shadow, a constant reminder of the man he once was. The knowledge of his past actions, the echoes of violence, remained, influencing his interactions and shaping his present. He attempted to build a life rooted in faith and community, but the specter of his former self lingered, a subtle unease that touched those who knew his story. The tale of Yves Trudeau exemplified a chilling capacity for violence intertwined with meticulous planning. His small stature belied the immense power he wielded, a potent combination that made him both feared and respected within the organization. His ruthlessness wasn't born of reckless anger but stemmed from a cold, calculating nature, a strategic approach to achieving his objectives. The contrast between his outward appearance and his inner capacity for destruction only amplified his mystique. To be underestimated was to be vulnerable, a lesson many learned the hard way. His very presence instilled a sense of unease, a constant reminder that beneath a seemingly
ordinary facade com se aleda dangerous mind.
The Lennoxville incident of 1985, a brutal reckoning for perceived betrayal, stands as a stark testament to the internal power struggles that afflict any organization built on violence and loyalty. The act itself was not merely retribution, it was a demonstration of power, a warning to anyone who dared defy the established order. The fact that Trudeau narrowly escaped death underscored the complexities of the situation, the intricate web of alliances and betrayals that defined the club's internal dynamics. He became a symbol, not of innocence, but of a precarious existence, perpetually walking a tightrope between survival and oblivion. The repercussions of that event rippled through the club, permanently reshaping its power structure and cementing his place in its history. The involvement of figures like Yves Trudeau with organizations such as the West End Gang illustrates a blurring of boundaries, a symbiotic relationship between outlaw motorcycle clubs and other criminal enterprises. These alliances granted access to resources, power, and influence beyond what the club could achieve alone. Yet they also entangled members in a broader network of criminal activity, exposing them constantly to heightened risk and conflict. This exchange was not merely transactional. It involved a complex interplay of mutual benefit, strategic maneuvering, and a shared understanding of the underworld's unwritten rules. Such collaboration raised the stakes for everyone involved, further blurring the lines between loyalty and betrayal. The story of the Popeye Moto Club's transformation and eventual merger with the Hells Angels offers a fascinating glimpse into the evolving landscape of organized crime in Quebec. The Popeyes emerged during a period of social upheaval and rebellious spirit, developing a distinct identity that shaped their early character. Their subsequent merger with the Hells Angels was not simply a consolidation of power but a cultural collision, a fusion of distinct traditions and philosophies. The result was a hybrid organization that inherited the Hells Angels' aggressive reputation while retaining echoes of the Popeyes' unique legacy. The narrative surrounding Yves Trudeau's exploits, marked by meticulous planning and a chilling emotional detachment, serves as a cautionary tale about the seductive allure of power. His ability to compartmentalize his actions, separating his personal identity from his professional role, was central to his effectiveness. This detachment enabled him to carry out brutal acts with a coldness that horrified even those accustomed to the club's violence. His expertise in explosives, honed through seemingly legitimate employment, equipped him with a devastating weapon, effectively turning him into a one-man demolition squad. The staggering number of killings attributed to Yves Trudeau, 43 individuals over a relatively short period, paints the portrait of a man immersed in an unrelenting cycle of violence. Repeatedly taking lives must have eroded any sense of morality, blurring the distinction between right and wrong. This relentless transgression highlights the dehumanizing effects of prolonged exposure to brutality, a chilling reminder of how easily one can become desensitized to the value of human life. The evolution of the Hells Angels, from a countercultural phenomenon into a globally recognized organization, demonstrates remarkable adaptability and resilience. Throughout its history, the club has navigated shifting social and political landscapes, adjusting its strategies and tactics to preserve its dominance. This capacity to evolve and reinvent itself has allowed the Hells Angels to endure despite relentless legal challenges, intense law enforcement scrutiny, and internal strife.
The story of Yves Trudeau his rise, transformation, and eventual downfall encapsulates the complexities inherent in the Hells Angels world.
It is a tale of loyalty and betrayal, violence and redemption, power and vulnerability. His life serves as a potent reminder that even in the darkest corners of the criminal underworld, human drama unfolds with all its familiar joys and sorrows, hopes and disappointments. His journey offers a lens through which we can examine the nature of power, the seduction of violence, and the enduring human search for meaning in a world often defined by chaos and uncertainty. The echoes of his life will undoubtedly resonate through the annals of the Hells Angels for generations to come. The rivalry between the Hells Angels and the Outlaws began in the 1930s, when both groups emerged as post-war biker fraternities. Initially, they coexisted peacefully, united by a shared passion for motorcycles and a rebellious ethos. However, as both organizations grew in size and influence, so too did their ambitions and territorial aspirations. The Outlaws, primarily based on the East Coast, began encroaching on the Hells Angels' West Coast stronghold, igniting a simmering tension that would eventually explode into open warfare. The conflict was characterized by violence, intimidation, and an unrelenting struggle for supremacy. Both clubs engaged in bitter territorial disputes, targeting each other's clubhouses, businesses, and members. Bloodshed escalated throughout the 1960s and 1990s, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and ruined reputations. Shootings, beatings, and arson became routine as each side sought to assert dominance. One particularly brutal episode occurred in the mid-1970s, when a Hells Angels member was gunned down in Pennsylvania. In retaliation, the Angels launched a massive raid on an Outlaws clubhouse in Massachusetts, leading to multiple arrests and a significant intensification of hostilities. The violence was not limited to isolated incidents. It created a pervasive climate of fear and hostility that permeated the entire biker community. Both organizations actively planted informants to infiltrate each other's ranks, deepening the atmosphere of paranoia and mistrust. The geographic divide between the clubs, East versus West, was a critical factor fueling the conflict, with the Hells Angels' dominance on the West Coast. The Hells Angels clashed directly with the Outlaws' East Coast presence, sparking an ongoing power struggle across the country. This geographic divide also made mediation difficult, as few neutral parties existed who could effectively bridge the gap. Although hostility between the two clubs has waxed and waned over the years, the underlying tension remains palpable. Despite efforts at reconciliation, a legacy of violence and betrayal has left deep scars on both sides. Their rivalry stands as a constant reminder of the ruthless nature of the biker world and the extreme measures these organizations will take to defend their territory and reputation. This conflict isn't merely about turf, it's about pride, respect, and an unwavering adherence to a code of conduct that demands loyalty and retribution. Close behind the Outlaws in terms of threat was the Bandidos Motorcycle Club. Originating in Texas, the Bandidos posed a different kind of challenge to the Hells Angels. Unlike the Outlaws, who were primarily concentrated on the East Coast, the Bandidos expanded aggressively across the South and Midwest, directly challenging the Angels' dominance across a vast swath of the country. Confrontations with the Bandidos were often marked by ruthless efficiency and a readiness to employ brutal tactics. Tensions between the two clubs reached a boiling point in the 1980s, when a series of violent incidents ignited a full-scale war. This conflict proved especially devastating, spanning multiple states and resulting in numerous deaths. The Bandidos' brutality, combined with their strategic expansion, made them a formidable adversary for the Hells Angels. The events of 1989 in Hollister, California, marked a particularly dark chapter in this rivalry. Following a dispute over territory and drug trafficking, a violent clash erupted between members of both clubs. The incident led to several arrests and left a lasting impact on the local community, underscoring the destructive potential of the conflict. The intensity of the war with the Bandidos prompted the Hells Angels to launch a series of preemptive strikes, targeting Bandidos clubhouses and disrupting their operations, in an effort to weaken their rivals' influence and deter further aggression. However, these actions only escalated the conflict and deepened the animosity between the two organizations. The Bandidos' reputation for ruthless efficiency and their willingness to use violence kept the Hells Angels perpetually on edge. The war with the Bandidos was a prolonged and bloody affair, leaving behind a trail of shattered lives and ruined reputations. It starkly illustrated the brutal reality of the biker world and the lengths to which these groups would go to protect their territory and standing. Beyond these two primary rivals, the Mongols Motorcycle Club also presented a significant challenge to the Hells Angels. Hailing from Southern California, the Mongols built a lucrative criminal empire centered on drug trafficking and extortion. Their aggressive expansion into territories traditionally controlled by the Hells Angels triggered a series of violent confrontations. Known for their ruthless efficiency and brutal tactics, the Mongols became a persistent source of concern for the Angels. Indeed, the level of violence in the conflict with the Mongols often surpassed even that seen in the wars against the Outlaws and Bandidos. One key distinction between the Mongols and other clubs was their predominantly Asian membership. This cultural difference, combined with their criminal activities, subjected them to heightened scrutiny and prejudice from both law enforcement and the general public. Nevertheless, the Mongols demonstrated remarkable resilience, navigating this hostile environment while building a formidable criminal organization, making them an especially dangerous and tenacious adversary. The relentless cycle of conflict and retaliation exacted a heavy toll on all involved.
The wars against the outlaws, bandidos,
and Mongols left a legacy of violence and bitterness that continues to shape the outlaw biker world today. Although reconciliation efforts have occasionally been attempted, deep-seated mistrust and the thirst for vengeance continue to simmer beneath the surface. These wars were not fought solely on the streets. They also played out in courtrooms. Law enforcement agencies systematically targeted key members of each club, aiming to dismantle their criminal enterprises and disrupt their operations. Legal battles were often protracted and complex, requiring extensive investigations and substantial resources. While the constant threat of prosecution deterred some members, it also hardened the resolve of others, fueling further defiance. The conflicts with the outlaws, bandidos, and Mongols revealed the resilience of the outlaw biker community and its unwavering commitment to its code of conduct. The Hells Angels' dominance was never unchallenged, and the battles waged against these rivals cemented their status as the world's most notorious and powerful motorcycle club. Yet these victories came at a steep cost, leaving behind a legacy of violence, animosity, and an unending struggle to maintain their position at the top. The relentless pursuit of power and control continues to define the Hells Angels, shaping their identity and driving their actions in a world where loyalty and retribution reign supreme. And so, as the 20th century drew to a close, the landscape of outlaw motorcycle clubs grew increasingly fractured and complex. The ongoing conflict with the rebels, in particular, signaled a shift from localized territorial disputes toward what resembled full-scale warfare. This was no longer simply about controlling tattoo parlors or motorcycle repair shops. It was about dominance, about projecting an image of invincibility in a world where law enforcement pressure was intensifying and public perception was rapidly changing. The assassination of Nick Martin, while seemingly a localized incident within the Australian criminal underworld, resonated far beyond Australia's borders. It served as a chilling reminder of the lengths to which these clubs were willing to go to protect their interests and eliminate their rivals. The reaction wasn't confined to retaliatory violence. Australian authorities, under immense public and political scrutiny, responded with unprecedented force. New legislation, often described as anti-biker laws, sought to dismantle the infrastructure that supported these clubs. This included restrictions on gatherings, bans on club colors and paraphernalia, and asset forfeiture programs designed to seize the ill-gotten gains that funded their operations. While these laws undoubtedly disrupted club activities and made it more difficult for members to operate openly, they also served to galvanize the clubs, fostering a sense of defiance and pushing some activities further underground. The clubs began to cultivate a martyr figure in Martin, using his death to recruit new members and to further demonize law enforcement in the eyes of their followers. The very measures intended to weaken them seemed to inadvertently strengthen their resolve. The global reach of both the Hells Angels and the rebels further complicated the situation. Conflicts that originated in Australia quickly spilled over into other countries, as members traveled internationally to assist their comrades or to pursue their own criminal ventures. Europe, Southeast Asia, and New Zealand became new battlegrounds in this escalating war. It was a period of intense pressure for the Hells Angels, a test of their organizational strength and their ability to maintain control over a network of increasingly independent chapters. Internal dynamics within the club were also strained, as ambitious leaders sought to exploit the chaos to advance their own positions. The conflicts weren't limited to just the rebels and the Hells Angels. The Comanche, a club deeply entrenched in the Australian criminal landscape, emerged as a key player in this era of intensified violence, often serving as intermediaries and instigating conflicts between other clubs. The Finn, despite their ongoing struggle against the Hells Angels, found themselves caught in the crossfire. Their resources and manpower stretched thin as they attempted to defend their territory. And the tragic story of Jason Dezo, an innocent bystander caught in the middle of a Hells Angels, Finn conflict, served as a stark reminder of the human cost of these ongoing disputes. The investigation into Dezo's death exposed the chilling level of planning and execution involved in the conflicts. The revelation that a highly trained ex-Special Forces soldier had been hired to assassinate Nick Martin underscored the professionalism and sophistication of the criminal networks operating within these clubs. Law enforcement agencies faced the challenge of infiltrating these deeply entrenched organizations, gathering evidence, and bringing perpetrators to justice, all while navigating the constant threat of retaliation and violence. The process was slow, painstaking, and fraught with danger. The rise of the internet and social media added a new dimension to the conflict. Clubs began using online platforms to communicate with members, recruit new members, and disseminate propaganda. Law enforcement agencies, in turn, began monitoring online activity to gather intelligence and identify potential threats. The digital landscape became a new battleground in this ongoing war. The lines between the physical world and the virtual world blurred, creating new challenges for both the clubs and the authorities. Beyond the immediate conflicts between clubs, a broader cultural shift was underway. The outlaw motorcycle club lifestyle, once a symbol of rebellion and freedom, was increasingly viewed with suspicion and disdain. Public perception of these clubs was shaped by media coverage of violent clashes, drug trafficking investigations, and involvement in other criminal activities. The clubs struggled to maintain a positive image, attempting to portray themselves as community organizations while simultaneously engaging in illegal activities. The Finn, battling for survival against the relentless pressure of the Hells Angels, exemplified the tenacity and resilience of smaller outlaw clubs. Their ongoing struggle was a testament to their determination to maintain their independence and resist the dominance of the larger, more powerful clubs. The memory of Jason Dezo fueled their resolve, reminding them of the human cost of their ongoing conflict. They represented defiance, a refusal to be swallowed whole by the larger organizations. The events of the early 21st century demonstrated that the story of the Hells Angels wasn't a simple narrative of criminal enterprise. It was a complex interplay of power, loyalty, rebellion, and violence. It was a story of how a motorcycle club, originating in post-war California, could evolve into a global criminal organization capable of inspiring both fear and fascination. The club's constant evolution, its ability to adapt to changing circumstances and exploit new opportunities, was a key factor in its enduring success. However, the ongoing conflicts, increasing law enforcement pressure, and shifting public perception also posed a significant threat to the club's long-term survival. The question wasn't whether the Hells Angels would face challenges, but whether they would be able to overcome them. The legacy of the club, its place in the history of organized crime, depended on its ability to navigate the turbulent waters of the 21st century. The shadow of Nick Martin's assassination and the Finn's defiant struggle served as constant reminders of the price of power and the fragility of even the most seemingly invincible organizations. The story, far from being over, was entering a new and uncertain chapter. His early life was steeped in the vibrant, yet often turbulent, world of Cologne's nightlife. Born to Turkish immigrant parents, Nicardi's experiences shaped his understanding of power, loyalty, and the unspoken rules of survival. Cologne's underground scene wasn't just about music and dancing, it was a breeding ground for illicit activities, a place where shadows concealed intricate networks of influence. Nicardi quickly learned to navigate this complex landscape, observing, adapting, and developing a keen sense for opportunity. He demonstrated an innate ability to connect with people from all walks of life, charming, intimidating, and manipulating as needed to achieve his goals. This wasn't a calculated strategy but a natural extension of his personality, a reflection of the environment in which he grew up. His introduction to the Hells Angels wasn't a sudden plunge into a criminal underworld. It was a gradual immersion, a slow burn of fascination with the club's reputation for unwavering loyalty, brutal efficiency, and unparalleled power. The Angels represented a stark contrast to the chaotic nature of Cologne's nightlife, offering structure, hierarchy, and a clear path to influence. He was drawn to their image of invincibility, their defiance of societal norms, and the implicit promise of belonging to something larger than himself. Initially, he served as an enforcer, a silent shadow carrying out the club's orders, honing his skills in intimidation and violence. This period was crucial in establishing his reputation within the Angels, proving his dedication and ruthlessness to those above him. But Nicardi wasn't content with being a mere tool.
Repossesse da restes ambition, a burning desire to rise through the ranks and seize control.
He understood that brute force alone wouldn't be enough. He needed to cultivate alliances, manipulate rivals, and master the art of political maneuvering. He began building a network of loyalists, men who recognized his ambition and were willing to pledge their allegiance. He identified weaknesses in the existing leadership, exploiting rivalries and sowing discord to create opportunities for himself. He wasn't afraid to betray former allies, demonstrating a chilling disregard for sentimentality. It was a ruthless game of chess, and Nicardi was determined to win. His ascent was marked by a series of calculated moves, each designed to solidify his position and eliminate potential threats. He expertly managed public perception, presenting himself as a charismatic leader while simultaneously orchestrating acts of violence and intimidation behind the scenes. He understood that power wasn't just about control, it was about perception. He fostered a culture of fear and respect within the club, ensuring his authority went unquestioned. He actively recruited individuals with specialized skills, former soldiers, experienced criminals, and those with a proven track record of unwavering loyalty. He transformed the Angels into a highly organized and efficient operation, capable of executing complex schemes with ruthless precision. Accusations of Nicardi's involvement in illicit activities have always been a tangled web of rumors and circumstantial evidence. Although he never directly confessed to any crimes, his presence at key events and his known associations with individuals involved in criminal enterprises were often enough to link him to a wide range of offenses. He was suspected of involvement in drug trafficking, money laundering, extortion, and even murder. Authorities repeatedly attempted to build a case against him, but he always managed to evade prosecution, skillfully exploiting legal loopholes and leveraging his connections to influence the judicial process. His ability to outmaneuver the law became legendary, further cementing his reputation as an untouchable figure. The moniker Godfather of Cologne wasn't just a casual nickname, it was a testament to his unparalleled influence over the city's underworld. He wasn't merely the leader of the Hells Angels, he was a central figure in a complex network of criminal organizations, controlling everything from drug distribution to protection rackets. He had the ear of politicians, the loyalty of police officers, and the fear of his rivals. He cultivated a climate of intimidation, ensuring that anyone who dared challenge his authority would face swift and merciless retribution. He had become an institution, a symbol of power and corruption that permeated every level of Cologne's society. His escape from conviction wasn't a matter of luck. It was the culmination of years of meticulous planning and strategic manipulation. He had developed a deep understanding of the legal system, exploiting its weaknesses and finding ways to circumvent its rules. He had cultivated relationships with key individuals within the judiciary, ensuring any case against him would be handled with leniency. He had also mastered the art of misinformation, spreading false narratives and discrediting witnesses to undermine attempts to build a case against him. He had constructed a fortress of protection around himself, making it virtually impossible for authorities to penetrate. The war between the nomads and the Hells Angels intensified during his reign, transforming the streets of Germany into a battleground. The escalating violence resulted in numerous injuries, arrests, and even fatalities, highlighting the deep-seated animosity between the two clubs. The German government struggled to contain the conflict, deploying additional police resources and enacting stricter laws aimed at curbing gang activity. Yet, despite these efforts, the violence continued unabated, fueled by territorial disputes, personal vendettas, and a relentless pursuit of power. The rumors surrounding his involvement in the attacks on the nomads' leadership, accusing Nicardi of orchestrating the violence, was never definitively proven, adding another layer of intrigue to his already complex persona. He skillfully deflected these accusations, portraying himself as a victim of circumstance, a target of politically motivated attacks. The lack of concrete evidence allowed him to maintain his image of untouchability, further solidifying his grip on power. His ability to manipulate public perception was a crucial factor in his continued success. Nicardi's legacy is one of power, corruption, and unwavering ambition. He represents the dark underbelly of German society, a stark reminder of the insidious influence of organized crime. His story serves as a cautionary tale, a testament to the dangers of unchecked power and the corrosive effects of corruption. While his reign may have ended, his influence continues to linger, a shadow cast over the city of Cologne, a constant reminder of the man who dared to challenge the law and emerged victorious. His story will continue to be told, whispered in hushed tones in the city's shadows, a chilling testament to the rise and fall of the Godfather of Cologne. The raid sent shockwaves across the entire criminal underworld. It wasn't just about the arrests, it was the realization that their world, their carefully constructed empire of fear and money, was vulnerable. The investigation, spearheaded by relentless German authorities, didn't stop at those initial arrests. It was a deep dive into the intricate web of businesses, shell corporations, and clandestine networks that sustained the Hells Angels' power. Authorities followed the money, meticulously tracing the flow of illicit funds through a labyrinth of offshore accounts and dubious transactions. Each recovered asset, each seized vehicle, each frozen bank account chipped away at the club's resources and exposed the fragility of their operation. Norbert Butcher's testimony proved invaluable, providing authorities with a detailed roadmap of the club's inner workings, revealing the identities of key players and outlining the scope of their criminal activities. He spoke of the family meetings, the coded language used to coordinate operations, and the ruthless methods used to silence dissent and enforce loyalty. His revelations painted a stark portrait of a criminal organization operating with chilling efficiency and a complete disregard for the law. While his motivations were undoubtedly complex, a mixture of fear, remorse, and self-preservation, his cooperation significantly undermined the club's ability to defend itself. But even as the legal battles raged on, the underlying tensions within the Hells Angels remained. The arrests had created a power vacuum, sparking a brutal struggle for control. With the established leadership behind bars, rival factions emerged, vying for dominance. Some believed in maintaining the club's traditional hardline approach, while others advocated for a more subtle, less visible operation. These internal divisions weakened the club, making it even more susceptible to external pressure. The rivalry with the Bandidos, never far beneath the surface, intensified. Seeing their enemies weakened, the Bandidos attempted to exploit the situation, aggressively poaching members and encroaching on territory. The truce, already strained, shattered completely, plunging the two clubs into a renewed cycle of violence. The streets of Germany, already scarred by years of conflict, became the stage for a new chapter in the ongoing feud. Jeffrey Pike, sensing an opportunity to solidify his position, pushed for a more aggressive stance. He saw the Hells Angels' vulnerability as a chance to expand the Bandidos' influence and claim territory that had previously been off-limits. Under his leadership, the Bandidos launched a series of brazen attacks, targeting Hells Angels' hangouts and disrupting their operations. The escalating violence triggered a renewed wave of public outrage, placing even more pressure on law enforcement to intervene. The investigations didn't stop at Germany. Authorities across Europe began collaborating, sharing information and coordinating raids targeting Hells Angels and Bandidos chapters operating in other countries. From Scandinavia to Eastern Europe, the criminal networks of both clubs were exposed, revealing a complex web of international connections. It was clear that the conflict extended far beyond national borders, impacting communities and undermining the rule of law across the continent. Beyond the headline-grabbing arrests and violent clashes, the fall of the Hells Angels had a profound impact on the broader criminal landscape. It sent a message to other criminal organizations that even the most powerful and entrenched empires could be brought down by relentless investigation and unwavering commitment to justice. The disruption of the Hells Angels' operations created opportunities for smaller, less visible criminal groups to emerge, filling the void left by their downfall. However, the dismantling of such a deeply ingrained organization proved to be a complex and ongoing process. Despite the arrests and convictions, the underlying conditions that had allowed the Hells Angels to thrive remained. The poverty, the lack of opportunity, and the pervasive sense of alienation that had drawn so many young men into the club's orbit were still present. Addressing these root causes would be crucial in preventing the emergence of similar criminal organizations in the future. The women who had been exploited and abused within the Hells Angels brothel empire found themselves facing a daunting task, rebuilding their lives and escaping the long shadow of their past. Many were traumatized and vulnerable, requiring specialized support and protection. Witness protection programs became essential, shielding them from the potential for retribution and providing them with a chance to start anew. The bravery of these women, in coming forward to testify against their abusers, helped expose the full extent of the club's criminal activities and brought a measure of justice to the victims. The Pasha, a notorious stronghold of the Hells Angels, became a chilling reminder of the club's dark legacy. Once a symbol of power and intimidation, it now stood vacant, a hollow shell of its former self. Attempts to repurpose the building met resistance from local residents, who feared it would become a magnet for criminal activity. Eventually, it was demolished, erasing a visible reminder of the club's reign of terror. Frank Hannib's Bones MC, having previously aligned with the Hells Angels, found themselves navigating a shifting landscape. Their connections to the club created complications, drawing scrutiny from law enforcement. The Bones MC attempted to distance themselves from the Hells Angels, but their past affiliations remained a source of suspicion. The investigation also uncovered the involvement of corrupt officials, police officers and politicians, who had turned a blind eye to the Hells Angels' criminal operations in exchange for bribes and favors. The exposure of these individuals triggered further investigations and prosecutions, further eroding public trust in law enforcement and the justice system.
The long-term consequences of the Hells Angels do fall extended far beyond the criminal justice system.
It sparked a broader conversation about the challenges of combating organized crime, the importance of protecting vulnerable populations, and the need for systemic reforms to address the root causes of criminal behavior. Although the club's power had been significantly diminished, the fight against organized crime was far from over. The legacy of the Hells Angels served as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even the most entrenched empires can be toppled by unwavering commitment to justice and an uncompromising refusal to tolerate lawlessness. The scars remained, etched into Germany's landscape and the memories of those who had suffered under their rule. His carefully cultivated online persona, however, isn't merely a rebranding exercise. It reflects a profound shift in how power is displayed and maintained in the modern era. The boundaries between legitimate business and criminal enterprise have blurred, and Nicardi understands this better than most. He isn't just flaunting wealth, he's demonstrating control, a silent declaration that he operates above the law, a master puppeteer pulling strings from the shadows. And the response has been predictably intoxicating. Consider the private security sector, a seemingly innocuous avenue for legitimate business. Yet within its operations lie opportunities for exploitation and influence that align perfectly with Nicardi's established methods. Providing protection services to high-profile clients isn't just a means of generating income. It's a way to embed himself within elite circles, gathering intelligence, wielding influence, and blurring the lines between legitimate security and organized crime. Who are these clients? They are individuals and businesses that thrive on discretion and power, those who value protection backed by a reputation for ruthlessness and efficiency. The lavish estates scattered across continents, the sprawling properties hidden within exclusive resorts, these aren't just symbols of extravagant wealth, they're strategic assets. Think of them as nodes within a vast, interconnected network. Safe havens where assets can be concealed, money laundered, and operations conducted with minimal oversight. The very architecture of these properties, the sophisticated security systems, the discreet staff, contributes to an aura of impenetrable secrecy, reinforcing the perception that Nicardi operates beyond the reach of law enforcement. His relationships with women, too, present a striking contradiction, a mirror reflecting the duality of his public and private life. Carefully curated images of lavish parties and exclusive events, featuring supermodels and influencers, paint a picture of charm and sophistication. Yet beneath this glossy facade lies a darker reality, a legacy of exploitation and abuse stretching back to his early days controlling Cologne's red light district. This duality underscores the complex, and often disturbing, nature of his power. The ability to project an image of respectability while simultaneously engaging in activities that exploit and endanger others. His reinvention isn't a sudden change of heart. It's a calculated adaptation, a strategic evolution driven by a deep understanding of human psychology and the dynamics of power. He knows that notoriety, even negative notoriety, can be a form of influence. Every arrest, every raid, every courtroom battle doesn't diminish his power. It amplifies it, transforming him into a myth, a legend whispered in criminal circles. The parallels with George Christie, former president of the Ventura chapter, offer a fascinating lens through which to examine Nicardi's current trajectory. Christie's eventual departure from the club and his rebranding as an author and public speaker represented an attempt at redemption, a conscious effort to distance himself from his past. Nicardi, however, doesn't seek redemption. He embraces the mythology, reveling in the perception of untouchability. He understands that true power isn't about escaping the shadows, it's about mastering them, controlling the narrative, and shaping the perception of reality. And the club, the Hells Angels, remains a constant thread throughout his story. While Nicardi may outwardly distance himself from the organization's formal structures, his methods, worldview, and understanding of power are all deeply rooted in the club's principles and traditions. He embodies a particularly insidious form of power, the ability to operate within and beyond the boundaries of formal structures, wielding influence from the shadows while maintaining a veneer of respectability. The fascination with Nicardi's story isn't just about the crimes he's committed. It's about the larger questions he raises about power, influence, and the blurred lines between legitimate business and criminal enterprise. He embodies a new era of organized crime, an era in which power isn't measured solely by violence and intimidation, but by influence, perception, and the ability to control the narrative. His mastery of social media and his calculated cultivation of a public image reflect a profound shift in how power is displayed and maintained in the modern age. He grasps that in a world saturated with information, perception often outweighs reality. He has weaponized social media, transforming it into a meticulously constructed smokescreen that distracts from the dark foundations of his wealth and influence. And the legend continues to grow, fueled by an endless cycle of media attention, legal battles, and whispers of untold riches. His name has become synonymous with power, danger, and untouchability. He has evolved into a figure of both fear and fascination, a cautionary tale about the seductive allure of power and the corrupting influence of wealth. Consider his vast network of offshore accounts, carefully concealed behind layers of shell corporations and front businesses. Tracing these assets is a monumental task, demanding international cooperation and specialized expertise, a testament to his meticulous planning and deep understanding of the complexities of global finance. The resources at his disposal are staggering: a team of lawyers, accountants, and consultants who are leaders in their fields. They are the architects of his financial empire, the guardians of his secrets, and the enablers of his power. The sheer scale of his operation is mind-boggling, a sprawling web of businesses, investments, and relationships spanning continents. It stands as proof of his ambition, cunning, and relentless pursuit of dominance. The legacy he leaves behind will be one of controversy, fascination, and enduring mystery. He is a figure destined to be debated and analyzed for years to come, a symbol of a world where the boundaries between right and wrong, legitimate and criminal, grow ever more indistinct. He represents a profound challenge to the very foundations of law and order, illustrating the enduring potency of organized crime in the 21st century. His story serves as a chilling reminder that the pursuit of wealth and power can corrupt even the most seemingly ordinary individuals, transforming them into figures of myth and legend, forever shrouded in the shadows they themselves have cast. His influence extends far beyond the crimes he's committed, shaping how power itself is perceived in a world increasingly defined by wealth, influence, and the elusive quest for control. And despite their intensity and global reach, investigations consistently hit a wall. The more aggressively law enforcement pursued him, the more elusive he became, and the more entrenched his power appeared to grow. It wasn't merely about evading arrest, it was about frustrating the entire system, demonstrating an almost contemptuous disregard for the legal structures meant to hold him accountable. This wasn't the predictable brutality of a traditional mob boss. It was a calculated, subtle dismantling of the very foundations upon which justice rests. It became clear that arresting Nicardi alone wouldn't solve the problem. The real issue was a network, a philosophy, a modus operandi that extended far beyond any single individual. The sheer ingenuity of his financial maneuvers was baffling. He didn't just hide money, he buried it, nesting shell corporations within shell corporations, exploiting complex legal loopholes and capitalizing on inconsistencies in international banking regulations. Every time authorities thought they were closing in on an asset, another would mysteriously surface elsewhere. Forensic accountants would spend months painstakingly tracing transactions, only to find themselves at a dead end, a deliberately engineered smokescreen designed to waste time and drain resources. It wasn't just about the money itself, it was about the message it sent, that he was above the law, untouchable by the very forces meant to constrain him. Public perception played a critical role as well. While law enforcement struggled to build a case, Nicardi meticulously crafted an image of a successful businessman, a philanthropist, even a modern-day Renaissance man. He sponsored local charities, funded cultural initiatives, and positioned himself as a pillar of the community. He understood that even the most damning evidence could be softened by a favorable public image. That perception could often eclipse reality. The media, ever hungry for a compelling story, frequently played right into his hands, providing a platform for his carefully curated narrative. A symbiotic relationship emerged. Nicardi fed the media with polished stories, and the media, in turn, helped shield him from scrutiny. And it wasn't just mainstream outlets. Nicardi mastered the art of social media, recognizing that the digital landscape offered unprecedented opportunities to control the narrative. He used platforms like Instagram and Twitter to project an image of success, style, and benevolence. He posted carefully staged photos of himself attending charity galas, meeting local dignitaries, and engaging in seemingly innocuous pursuits. These curated glimpses into his life served to humanize him, make him relatable, and deflect attention from the more troubling dimensions of his business dealings. He understood that in the age of viral content, a single positive image could wield more power than 1,000 lines of negative press. The complexity of his network went far beyond finance, extending deep into the political sphere. He quietly cultivated relationships with key government figures, forging alliances that provided him with a protective shield and significant influence. These weren't overt bribes or explicit quid pro quo arrangements. They were far more subtle and nuanced. Favors exchanged, connections forged, doors discreetly opened. He understood that true power wasn't merely about money or influence. It was about access access to information, access to decision-makers, access to the very levers of power. And he exploited those connections with ruthless efficiency, always careful to maintain plausible deniability. For law enforcement, the challenge wasn't just uncovering his crimes. It was dismantling an entire ecosystem of corruption and complicity. Simply arresting Niccardi wasn't enough. They needed to expose the entire network of enablers, the lawyers, accountants, bankers, and politicians, who formed the infrastructure supporting his illicit empire. Yet achieving this required a level of international cooperation and coordination that was often absent. Different jurisdictions operated under different laws, pursued different priorities, and frequently had vested interests in shielding their own economic or political elites. Whispers, too, played a crucial role. Hushed rumors circulated, stories of powerful protectors, secret deals, and a web of influence stretching into the highest corridors of power. Whether true or not, these rumors reinforced the perception that Niccardi was untouchable, that any attempt to bring him to justice would trigger fierce, possibly insurmountable resistance. They fostered an atmosphere of fear and intimidation, deterring potential witnesses from coming forward and severely hampering investigative efforts. The investigation became a revolving door of lawyers and investigators, each cycle consuming vast resources yet yielding little in the way of concrete results. Legal obstacles were relentless. Niccardi's legal team exploited every loophole and procedural technicality to delay proceedings and obstruct the prosecution. They filed motions to suppress evidence, challenged the admissibility of witnesses, and launched countersuits that further drained law enforcement's already stretched resources. Perhaps the most frustrating aspect of the entire saga was the persistent sense that Niccardi was always one step ahead, anticipating their moves, exploiting their weaknesses. He seemed to possess an almost uncanny ability to predict their next action, counter their strategies, and preserve his grip on power. It was as if he understood the legal system, the political landscape, and even human psychology more deeply than anyone else involved. In the end, the enduring question wasn't whether Niccardi was guilty, but whether anyone could ever prove it. The sheer weight of his wealth, influence, and meticulously crafted public image created a formidable barrier to justice. The very system designed to hold power accountable appeared to be buckling under the pressure of his immense clout. The legend of Niccardi continued to grow, a cautionary tale about the seductive allure of wealth and influence, a chilling reminder that in a world increasingly defined by money and power, the lines between right and wrong are often blurred, and the pursuit of justice can be a long, arduous, and ultimately elusive quest.